All right, let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the installation and quick start tutorial for Premia's range order bot. This video is going to go through some of the setup instructions, and it's going to act as a supplement to the README that already exists in the GitHub repository of the bot. But hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to have a good grasp of how to set up the bot, what the bot's supposed to do, and also how to run and manage the bot itself. And so we're going to cover three main categories here. First is the download and installation process of the bot. And so we're going to cover some of the prerequisites, things that are needed locally installed on the computer, along with some other things as well that are needed, as well as going through the configuration and settings of the bot once we download it. These will be settings that are more global variables plus specific to the bot itself and strategy specific. And then finally, we're going to try running this bot on testnet, and hopefully if everything goes well, the bot should get up and running for us, and we can kind of walk through some of the logs so you have an idea of what to expect when you start running the bot. So the first thing we'll do here is we'll navigate over to the GitHub repository. I'm going to drag that into our view here. And so there's two ways that we can get a copy of this repository on our computer. One is through something called git clone, and the other will be to just straight download the repository. So in both cases, we're going to go over to this button here called code, and we're going to click on that. And if you're not familiar with Git, or you don't have Git installed on your computer, you can go down here to download zip, and that will download a zip file on your computer, and you can unzip that and open up the repository that way. The other is going to be to use git clone, and what we'll do is we're going to get a copy of this URL right here. This is going to be the method that I'm using in the video. So let me pull a terminal into our view. And the first thing I want to do is I want to navigate to a folder where I want to store the range order bot. And so I'm going to go to my developer/demos folder. All right, so I'm there now. And then I'm going to type git clone. And then this URL that I just copied, I'm going to paste that in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the name of this repository or this folder on my computer to LP bot demo. Press enter. Okay, and so now the repository was cloned on my computer here, and then the next thing to do is to open it. So most people will want to open it through their IDE. So some people use Sublime, maybe VS Code, maybe IntelliJ. So whichever one you use, you can open that up and go to File, Open, find the directory of where your bot is, and then open it in that manner. In my case, I have a shortcut on my computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the bot itself like this, and then I'm going to type IDS space period, press enter. And so this is just a shortcut that I have on my computer that opens up projects for me directly from the terminal. All right. So we'll ignore these for now. We'll cover that in a bit. So if your IDE does not open up to the README, let's just go ahead and open that up, and we'll kind of start from top down and go through the entire README. The first important section to go through is going to be the prerequisites. So the first and foremost, you're going to need an EOA account, so an externally owned account on Ethereum. And more specifically, it needs to be funded on the Arbitrum chain. And so many people use different types of wallets to do this. We've included MetaMask as an example. It's one of the more popular ones, but we're not necessarily endorsing this wallet by any means. So if you do not have an EOA or you don't have an account funded on Ethereum, you can go ahead and just set up an account or wallet through a wallet provider like MetaMask, and then transfer funds over to that account from, say, a centralized exchange. From there, you'll have to bridge the capital from Ethereum mainnet to Arbitrum. Again, there's many different bridges that can do this, and we're not endorsing any particular one, but we did provide a link just for convenience of one of them that can help you and assist you in doing that. The repository is written in TypeScript, And so Node.js is likely needed to be able to run this on your computer. And so we provided a link here to be able to download and install Node.js. And optionally, if you do not have Git on your computer, but you would like to, that is something you could use as well here. Specifically, when we were doing the cloning of the repository, we used Git in the background. And so if you do not have Git on your computer, that's not something you would be able to do. But again, it's not critical. It's more of an option to do that. The other here that's really important is an RPC provider. And so we provided two examples here, Alchemy and Infura. And RPC providers are essentially gateways for your wallet to be able to interact on the blockchain. And so what we need to do here is we need to set up an account with one of these node providers, get an access key or an API key from them, and then use that API key to be able to access the blockchain, essentially with your EOA account, right? And so we'll go through steps on how to get that set up in the repository as well. Most of these providers provide free accounts, or they have a free tier, and the free tier should be enough to be able to run the bot. If you do become a power user, or you do want to trade a large amount of markets, it's possible that you would exceed the free tier in that case, and you would have to kind of upgrade to the premium tiers. But to get the bot up and running, you should be fine with the free tier. The next, and kind of last but not least, understanding what range orders are and how they work, concentrated liquidity on Premia v3 is extremely important to just have a good sense of what this bot does and how these orders are implemented in the marketplace and what happens once they're put out in the marketplace. So you can find more information about this by clicking on the hyperlink here where it says range orders. And that will take you directly to our Git books. And here you'll see it's already takes you straight to your LP range orders section where you can go through and read more details about the different types of parameters, basics of how range order works, and then you can go even further here where it discusses more detail of as your range order gets traversed, what happens to your collateral and your exposure in options terms. And so this is a great primer to read through. So even if you are slightly familiar with range orders, it probably would be helpful to read through this. It shouldn't take too long to do. And then you should be in a good place to continue. Excuse me. The supported pairs. So this range order bot uses IV oracles and spot oracles to be able to run. And the IV oracle is particularly important because it's what's used to price these options or to determine the fair value of these options so that your parameters can then price around that fair value. And so there's only so many markets we have implied volatility oracles for, and they're listed here. You can see the list is broken down by the development branch or the development chain, Arbitrum Gurley, and Arbitrum Mainnet or Arbitrum 1, which is the production chain. So one thing that might be a little implicit here is that when we discuss these token names, they're already hard-coded or assumed to be traded with USDC as the quote asset. And so when we talk about, say, WETH options, in particular for this range order bot, we're referring to WETH USDC pairs. And so this bot is hard-coded to use USDC as the quote asset. And so what that essentially means is that if you plan to trade puts in any one of these token symbols, you're going to additionally need USDC to cover those markets because that's the collateral type that's used. Now, if that sounds a little confusing to you or you're not really familiar with how our options are set up, you can actually go back to this link here where it says range orders, which essentially takes you to our Git books, and you can go up a few categories to options on Premia. And then this should give you a little bit of an overview and some additional color of how our options are set up, what collaterals are used, how the options are priced, etc. So that's extremely helpful if you are not familiar with our options on our exchange. So from there, we can actually go to the quick start. So we already did step one, which was to clone the repository on a local computer. If you're new to this, there's a link here that can take you to Git, which will give you some instructions on how to clone repositories on your computer. So step two, what we'll do is we'll install the dependencies for this repository. Now this can be done one of two ways. You can either use yarn install or you can use npm install as your command. And so the first thing we want to do, regardless of which one we use, we want to open up a terminal. And so my IDE here will open up directly to the repository location. So you can see it says LP bot demo. If you have an IDE that does not do this, you'll have to open up the terminal separately and then navigate to that specific directory of where the bot is to be able to then to be able to do the installation of packages. So in our case here, I'm going to use yarn install. Now, as I mentioned, if you're new to, say, Node.js and TypeScript, there's a good chance you don't have yarn installed on your computer. And in that case, just use npm install and it should do exactly the same thing. And so here we'll just type yarn install. We'll just give that a minute here. All right. Okay. And so this warning you see here, it's not an issue. This is just saying that there is a pure dependency for a particular package that we have that's not met, but we don't need or we don't use WebSockets in the range order bot, so this should not be an issue. So if this is the only warning that you see, you are in good shape and you are able to successfully download and install the package dependencies for this repository. You'll see two things on your repo now. You'll see a node modules folder, and then additionally, you'll see either a yarn lock or a package lock, depending on which installation process you used. So once we have that, we're going to move on to the environmental variables. And so we're going to look at the .env.example file. And in here, the instructions say that we want to rename this file to just .env. So there's a couple ways you can do this. One would be to actually just rename this specific file. So you can maybe right click on it and then go to rename, or however your IDE allows you to rename a file. You could also do a new file, and then from there just type in .env and just create an additional one. For the sake of this tutorial, I have an env that's already hydrated with values, variables. And so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that into the repo off the screen, and we should see that in a minute. There we go. All right. And so now there's 4 values that we need to be concerned with that we have to hydrate. The first is the 2 URLs from the node provider. And so as we talked about earlier, using maybe an Alchemy or Infura, if you create a free account, you can navigate into your account, find the chains that you'll be using. And in this case, you're going to be using Arbitrum1, the mainnet, and Arbitrum Girly as the testnet. And so when you go to those chains, you should be able to find a URL which will have an API key at the end of it. So I'm just going to copy paste sort of a dummy example here. So you'll see a chain that it's for. So in this case, our mainnet. You'll see the node provider here, it's Alchemy. And they'll attach the API key on the end. This is not a valid API key, by the way. It's just for example purposes only. So you're going to want to do that for both the mainnet and the testnet in the env file. And then additionally, you're going to want your public key, which would go here with LP address. And then you're going to want your private key that's associated with that address. And you're going to want to hydrate that here under LP private key. So we're not going to go through instructions on how to extract a private key. So whatever wallet you're using, that's going to be wallet specific. And so you'll have to access those instructions on that particular wallet to be able to get your private key. But once you get that, you can copy paste that in here and you should be set to go. And the last value here is the env, or the environmental variable. There's 2 environments you can run this in. One is in development mode and the other is in production. And so in here, you just type in development or production. And if it's development, it's going to run on testnet. And if you run in production, it's going to run on Arbitrum mainnet. All right, and so we have that covered now. We have our env file in there. We'll go down to the next step. Here it's going to say navigate to the source config index.example.ts file and rename it index.ts. All right. So let's go to source. We'll go to config. We're going to find the file right here. Okay. So we want to basically copy this file and get rid of the name example within the file name. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm actually just going to create a new file, index.ts. And then I'm going to go back to this example file. I'm going to select all. And then I'm going to go back into this index file that I just created. And I'm going to paste it in here. All right. And so now we have our configuration file set up. This is where all your settings are going to be, specifically to the range order bot. So what markets it's going to trade, how it's going to trade it, all of that's done within this configuration file. So first and foremost, the first category in here to look at is the log level. There's really only two log levels that you should be concerned with. First, to start out, you're likely going to want to start with info. And this is one of the 4 error types or log level types that you can use. Info produces a little less information than debug, but at some point when you get comfortable with the bot and you want to learn a little bit more about what it's doing or understand a little bit more about its configuration under the hood, using debug can be very helpful for that. But since we're just starting out here, we're going to leave it as info and we'll move on from there. So the next section is sort of the core of this configuration file, and this is the market params object. And so this is where you're going to put each and every market that you want to trade. And so you can see that the default in this file right now shows WETH and WBTC. It has a couple maturities for each. It's got some strikes for its calls and puts. It has a deposit size, a max exposure size, and a min option price. So deposit size here refers to the size for each order that you put within a particular market. So for every market, so in this example, we'll use WETH, the 2000 call, December 8th expiration. So that's one market. The bot's going to put 2 orders out in that market. It's going to put a bid order and an ask side order. And so when it does that, each one of these orders, given these settings, is going to put a size equivalent to 1. And that's referring to options. And so what that's saying there is that each one of these orders will give me a max exposure of either long one option or short one option. And so that gives you an ability to kind of control the different exposures you're going to get using the deposit size here. The max exposure is going to help you control how much of a particular option you acquire in either direction. And so when we talk about these numbers here, we talk about them in either long or short terms. And so max exposure here of 2 is basically just saying that in any one of these markets, these option markets that I've listed here above, I am only willing to get long 2 options or short 2 options. And then after that happens, I'm going to be in close only mode. And so I do not want to acquire more options than 2 in any one of these markets. And then the last setting here is min option price. So as options get out of the money, or when options essentially are getting close to expiration, many options tend to have very low dollar value associated with them. And so when that happens, it's common for markets to only express an ask side liquidity to that market because the option price is just too low to be putting a bid in. And so what min option price does is it creates that override and says, all right, well, if this option has reached such a low level that it's worth less than this number, then I don't want to be putting out a bid. This is only going to be ask side liquidity. And so I'm going to do this for each and every market that I want. I can copy paste this object and I can place whatever markets that were in the README under the supported pairs. It can be listed within market params and used. And again, depending on if you're using development or production mode, they are slightly different. So in our case, I have a pre populated version that I'm going to put in here for us to run. All right, okay. And so it's very similar, but just more relevant dates here. So we're not trading expired options. And I really do encourage you guys to take a look at the instructions here as well for each of the parameters that are required. There are some that are optional as well. There's some other helpful hints here, like for instance, determining how much you would want to deposit for each market. There's a quick little rule of thumb equations that were put in the README to kind of help, or well, in the index file to be able to help you better grasp how much collateral you're going to need based on the amount of markets that you want to trade. And so that's really helpful to kind of get a good idea of what's going to be required or how many markets you should be trading in the first place, depending on how much you have. An option price too, there's some details here about how normalized price works on our exchange. This is also in our Git books as well, but for convenience, I've included some of that information here. So once all that's set, we know what markets we're going to trade, we know what size we're going to trade in them, and we know the max exposure that we want to trade. Now we'll go down into some other settings. This one's a particularly important one. It's called withdrawal only. And so if at any point when you're running this bot, it dies, you kill it on purpose, your internet connection dies, whatever it may be, there can be a plethora of reasons why the bot stops running. Your existing positions will still exist in the marketplace. They are on chain and they are still there. And so if your intention was to stop the bot and remove your orders, you'll have to take an additional step to actually remove those orders. And so there's two ways you can do that. One is to, after you kill the bot, you can change this Boolean to true, and then you can run the bot again. And if you do that, the bot's going to run just once. It's going to find all your positions, and it's going to withdraw out of them, and then the bot's going to stop automatically. Now, if the reason why the bot got killed was because of, say, some issues that you have with your connectivity or maybe your computer itself, and you're not able to rerun the bot again, you can actually navigate to the website separately and see all your range orders there and manually withdraw from them via the web page. So really important note, again, if you kill the bot, and let's say you don't want to run it for a day or a couple days, be sure to turn this to true and run it once, and that way you'll know that you don't have any positions, and you can also just double check on the front end for protocol to actually verify that you don't have any positions open. Auto-generate strikes, I would set this to true. So if I put in a strike here within the market params of a pool that did not exist, this Boolean basically just asks, do you want to create that pool before you make the deposit? And so to do that, the only thing you'll end up paying is a little bit of extra gas, but it's very trivial. I think it's less than $1 to be able to deploy a pool. On Arbitrum, you can go ahead and do that, and then that way you'll be the first depositor in that pool, and you'll be able to make markets in that pool without an issue. Now, auto-generate strike, I do want to make one note here that our protocol uses a particular algorithm to determine what are valid strikes. And so auto-generate strikes does not mean I can make up whatever strike I want. It just means that if a pool did not exist for a valid strike, then you would be able to create it. So I'll give you a concrete example here. So for WETH, I cannot create a 2324 strike or a 2331 strike. I can create a 2300, I can create a 2400, I can create a 2500 strike, right? And so in this particular case, WETH, you can create markets in $100 intervals. In BTC's case, you can create intervals of 1,000, right? And so be very particular about the strikes you put in here. If you do put an invalid strike, the bot will yell at you and tell you that the strike is incorrect, and then it will force you to go back in and change that. So let's go down to the delta filters. So obviously over time, options change delta. So maybe the options that you put in the market params were one delta at the time when they started, and now they're another delta as time passes. And maybe that's not an ideal delta range that you are looking to trade. And so what this max filter or min-max filter does is it allows the bot to know when this option goes outside this range, withdraw the positions, and do not enter the market until the delta gets back in that range. Now, the recommended settings here hover around at the money and out of the money options. And that's just typical of option markets in general. They tend to trade more so in that delta range. And so it makes more sense when you're running the bot to be trading in those ranges to collect more fees. The min DTE. So DTE stands for days to expiration. And so as options get closer and closer to expiration, some might be less ideal to trade in. And so this min DTE filter allows you to avoid trading in those markets once that threshold is crossed. And again, it will withdraw your positions and won't enter into any new LP range orders until the market expires. Max collateral approval, so we're going to set that to true. This is just a convenience function or a convenience variable here. Most exchanges will generally set your approval of your tokens to max approval so that you don't have to approve your token transfers every single time you do a transaction on that exchange. And so this is no different. If you set it to true, you'll just do a one-time approval at the start of running the bot. If you set it to false, the bot will try to approve each and every individual transaction. So the next area we're getting into are the parameters of the range orders. And so these two parameters right here, range width multiplier and default spread, are relatively important. And so what we can do here is let's actually jump back to the range orders documentation. And I want to show you an illustration, this one right here. So whenever you create a range order, in this image, you have two range orders. You have the left side range order in blue. You have the right side range order in I guess that's pink. And you have a lower and upper tick for each one. And so those lower and upper ticks have a width, right? There's a certain distance between those points. Now, how do you determine that distance, or what's the appropriate distance? In the bot, it uses a percentage. And so it bases it off of the price of the option. And so let's say the option is $10, just to make the example very simple. If your range order multiplier is 60%, which I think is the default in here, yep, 60%, it's basically saying that we want our range order to be $6 wide, right? And so each one of these orders will be roughly $6 wide. And that helps kind of determine whatever deposit size you put, it will diffuse that deposit size across that width. So whether the width is wider or more narrow, it doesn't change the amount that you deposit. It just changes the concentration of the amount that you deposited. The next is the default spread. And so when you run this range order bot, or when you just do market making in general, collecting a spread is part of the alpha that you're looking to get. And so we can go back to this image here. And so let's assume that the Oracle tells you that the price is now P, right? And that arrow pointing right in the middle. That doesn't mean that's where you want to place your orders. You want to place a small spread between that fair value price and where you want your bid and your ask liquidity to be placed. And so we use default spread as the buffer against that implied volatility Oracle price. And so in the settings, we use, I believe, 10%, right? And so if we go back to our example that the option is worth $10, right? And so what that is saying that the range order on the right, or the ask liquidity, actually starts at $11, right? $11 and goes up to 17, right? So it's $6 wide. And then on the left side, the range order, or the bid side liquidity, is going to start at $9, and it's going to be $6 wide as well. So it's going to be between $3 and $9 on the left side. And so your default spread, you can change this to whatever you want. Obviously, the more aggressive the spread is, the more active you will trade, or actively you will trade. And that will require more frequent updates of your range orders. And the wider you make it, the less you're likely to trade, but the less frequently you'll have to update your orders. And so you'll have to find a sweet spot here, depending on the market you're trading, market conditions, et cetera, to try to figure out what makes the most sense for you. The next three parameters are about cycles and refresh rates. And so we'll start with this one in the middle here, the refresh rate. So here it's set to 5 minutes. And what that does is it says that once the bot runs and initializes itself, it's going to go to sleep. And every 5 minutes, it's going to wake up. And then it's going to do a couple things. First is it's going to check what happened to the spot market during that 5-minute window. How much did it change? And so what it does is it keeps a rolling record of since the last time it had updated its orders. Has the spot market moved a certain threshold? And that's when we walk into this second setting here, which is spot move threshold. And so every 5 minutes, we're checking market price. And then we're asking, has spot moved more than 1% since the last time we placed our orders? If the answer is no, don't do anything. If the answer is yes, then we want to go through each and every one of our markets that we have. We want to get the fair value of those options. And then we want to see if we still have that default spread baked in or not. So if the fair value has gone through our spread and we've lost our edge, it triggers the bot to remove the orders and place fresh ones with a new spread that's embedded in. Now, there are scenarios in which, let's say that the spot market doesn't move at all. 1% is relatively tight, but let's just say that it doesn't move. And every 5 minutes, it keeps pinging the spot price, hasn't changed at all. At some point, there's a time threshold that we use, and in this case, we use time threshold hours as 6. And what this says is that if spot price has not moved in the last 6 hours, and we have not updated our orders at any point in time during this process, go ahead and still check the current value of all these options and replace any orders that need to be replaced. And so what this does is it kind of helps manage our theta, right, in our option space, and especially if implied volatility is also changing significantly and it's not happening through spot price, you'll be able to capture that through this time component here, or this time threshold that we're using. And so again, in both cases, whether it's spot move or time threshold move, we're just checking, did we lose our spread? And if we did, let's put new orders out so we can capture that spread. So the last two settings here aren't particularly important for running the bot. The annihilation size. So our option contracts, if you are to get long options and also short options, those are actually two different tokens. And so in order to release the collateral from them, you actually have to call a function on our contracts called annihilate. And what that does is it takes the long side and the short side and says, okay, give me those, and then I'll give you back your collateral. And so the bot will automatically do this as it's trading. So if it's buying and it's selling, and you end up with long and short exposures, it will automatically see this, combine those, and release the collateral for you. The last value here is the risk-free rate. This is only used in the option pricing. So we use Black-Scholes for pricing options. And assuming that you're trading relatively near-dated options, this number doesn't necessarily need to be changed all too often. It won't change the performance of the bot drastically. But again, just keep an eye on this. Interest rates do change aggressively. From time to time, you will need to update this value. All right. So hopefully you got all that. I know that can be a lot, and that's quite overwhelming. The good news is every single one of these variables has very detailed description of what it is again that I basically paraphrased in this video. And so if you forget what one of these are, you should be able to find your answer within the definitions above each one of the variables. So let's go back to the README and see where we are. So we set up our index file right here. We reviewed each and every setting, and then now we're actually able to run yarn start in the command line to run the range order bot. So before we do that, there are two more sections here that I think would make sense for any new bot user to look at and read. One section is called Under the Hood, and the other one's called Limitations. So Under the Hood is going to give you a little bit more granular detail about how the bot's supposed to work and how it's supposed to run. And so this will give you a little better understanding of when the bot's running, what to expect, and if something were to go wrong, you'll be able to know that something's going wrong because the behavior is not following these details or descriptions of what it's actually supposed to be doing. And the bot, just like any other bot, will have its own limitations. And so this is not an exhaustive list, but it is a list of things that users should be aware of. And so please read these and just have a good understanding of what these limitations are. And if you're uncertain of both how this is supposed to work or what the limitations are, it can always be helpful to just start with very small sizes and or using the testnet to help you get more comfortable with how the bot works and how it runs. All right, and so without further ado, let's get this bot up and running. So there's two ways we can actually do this. Just like we did for installing packages, you can run either yarn, so you can do yarn start, or if you don't have yarn on your computer, you can type npm start. And so again, these are going to be exactly the same thing. They should do the same thing. So let's go ahead and just type yarn start and press enter. All right, so if you see this lovely Premia logo here, the bot now is up and running. And you're going to see a bunch of logs. At first, it's going to be a little overwhelming. There's different colors to each one of the logs. So the highest level is the app log. And so that's the one that you see in this like blue color. And this is the highest level description of what the bot is doing. I would suggest maybe starting with that category. And then within each one of these major elements of the cycle, there's more detailed information about what the bot's doing step by step, what markets it's looking at, what actions it's taking, so on and so forth. Additionally, there's warnings that may pop up from time to time. And so warnings can be of different severities. Most of them are mild. So for instance, let's say that there's a breach of one of your filters or parameters, maybe your delta range, for example, or your min option price. You might see a warning that pops up and it says, and it'll explain it to you very clearly, this option is out of your delta range. We are not going to deploy any liquidity for it. Or this option now has expired and we're going to settle this option and there's no new markets that will be deployed for this particular market, and so on and so forth. So they're very explicit and they will come up from time to time. Just read them. And if you have any questions, obviously feel free to kind of reach out to us and ask us, what this means or what's going on here, and we should be able to help you. So now the bots run. We call them cycles. So essentially, once the bot has cycled, you're going to see a message like this. It says cycle complete, now idling until next refresh. And so we had in our parameters set that the refresh rate is 5 minutes. And so every 5 minutes, this is going to run a little again, and it's going to ping the spot price. It's going to send a little message to you saying, okay, here's the current spot price. If there is an update that's triggered, it's going to go through this cycle again. If not, it's going to say thresholds not met or something of that nature, and then continue to wait another 5 minutes. During this process, you can also go to our website and you can check out the positions that you hold on the UI. And as well, you can look at above, there's a section called Portfolio Summary right here. And this section will give you a high-level overview of your balances, your positions that you have, the amount of range orders that you've posted. And so we can kind of go through one of these right now real quick. So this is by collateral. So if you notice, there's WETH, UBTC, and USDC. And so the reason why there's USDC in here is, again, because we're using that for puts. And so if you notice, the option positions under USDC actually both include WETH and REPBTC in there. So things we can see are the token balance, so our collateral balance, our option positions, if we have any, for the markets that we're trying to trade, how many active range orders there are. Of these range orders, how many of them are using tokens or collateral tokens to create those range orders. Then there's a section called option-based range orders. And so as you acquire option positions, the bot will automatically try to use those option positions to deposit further range orders as it evolves over time. And so you're not always going to be using collateral. There will be times at which you acquire positions and it will use those positions and try to close them out for you. And so this category here will explicitly tell you how many range orders you're using that are actually using options. And then of the range orders that are using collateral, how much is being utilized in range orders? And you can see that here as well. And That's it. So this bot has successfully run. It's started. It has cycled through all of the markets that we put in the market params. Obviously, between different cycles, feel free to read through and get comfortable with each one of these logs to kind of understand how it works and what it's doing. And that's it. I'm going to just go ahead and kill the bot here. If I wanted to, I could run the withdrawal only now. That would be the prudent thing to do if I didn't want to run this bot anymore. But since I'm on testnet, it's not particularly important to do, so I won't need to do that here on this video. I hope you enjoyed the video and you're able to get the bot up and running like we did in this video as well, and you're able to do it locally on your computer. If you need any help, like I said, or you'd even want to contribute, please reach out to us. One of the easiest places to find us is on Discord. And if you're not on Discord, you could reach out to us directly via email using our email at support@premia.finance. And that's it, folks. Good luck, and we hope you enjoy the product. Have a good one. Bye.